So what I'm going to do is record this session, and we'll look at the version that we have out for California specifically, because it does vary across the country, regionally, and for different utilities and so forth. And I'll give you a little more background info, and then we can go through the tool, and you can feel free to interrupt and ask specific questions if you want. So first of all, if you guys are already familiar with Snug, Snug uses the OptiMiser modeling engine in the background. So a lot of the concepts are going to be the same, actually. The way that the model pretty heavily influences how data gets entered and how measures are described and stuff. So you'll see a lot of the same things. And in fact, their interface is largely based on our wizard interface and the way we're able to kind of use calibration. So OptiMiser is it's very similar modeling wise to Snug, very different from Cake. So Cake is a regression based tool, and OptiMiser and Snug via OptiMiser are physics engines. They use hourly. It's actually a hybrid degree day hourly model under the hood to keep track of the gains and losses, energy flowing in and out of the house on an hourly basis, and it builds two models all the time. So as soon as you launch OptiMiser, you have a base building model and an improved building model, and the auditor's job becomes working through that wizard data entry interface to refine that model, to put in the information that they know about the building to get the best base model possible, and then just to characterize the measures that they want to propose. And then OptiMiser is always in real time calculating savings based on the difference between the base and the improved models. So I just started OptiMiser, and you can tell if you go to the loads pop up there, this loads button, it's a really helpful place to go, because you can always see really quickly what's happening in the model. So you can see that I haven't entered any historical usage, but I do have a model baseline in there, because the model baseline is always using the physics model. It's always using the mathematical model as the baseline for savings calculation. And I haven't entered any information, but it always has default characteristics in there. The bills are, we talk a lot about bills with OptiMiser and with Snug. They're not required, but they are really useful. So we've done a lot of work over the years to advance the typical bill analysis model. It's called a prism regression. We made a lot of advances on it to be able to extract as much information as possible from historical bills, and to be able to apply those and use those to calibrate the physics model. So I'm going to show an example of that, but they're not required, but they're just very, very useful. It's really rich with information. It makes it really easy on the contractor.
This first part, the project tab, you just fill in basic information, but the most important part will probably be the zip code, because that pulls like the weather data.
That's right. Yep. That's exactly right. I'm going to actually grab some sample bills. Okay. Okay, so you put in a zip code, and it asks you if you want to load the utility prices from the EIA. Those are very coarse, so they're just rough regional from the Energy Information Agency. If you have your own utility prices already preset, or if you're going to be importing them along with the bills, then you don't have to apply those.
Okay.
And I'm going to go ahead and fill out some fake homeowner information, because later on, when we go to finalize this and generate HPXML, you're going to have a bunch of QA checks here. So I happen to know that a lot of that information is on there. So it won't actually let me generate HPXML until I have that required information. Okay. Those, by the way, are things that if you guys are finding QA problems, you can always work with us to add additional checks. They can be optional or they can be hard stops to the QA message list specifically for California. And we can make sure that people are doing things before they leave the home. Okay, and then I'm going to switch over to the wizard here. This is just an introductory page. You dive right in. So the first question that trips people up is this same as owner box here. This, in OptiMiser, you can put in an owner address and a premise address. You can have two different addresses. It's basically like saying, if you say the same as owner, you're basically saying it's owner occupied. So if you change it, you're basically saying that the owner lives off site, so it's a rental situation. If you say it's different from owner, then you can put in the physical address that you're evaluating here.
I was just trying to follow up on anything else.
All right, let me just fill in a little bit of information. Using an actual example helps me because when I put in the bill data, it's very, very sensitive bill analysis. So if I'm using fake location, it's not going to line up with that my sample bills.
Do you have a default PDF, like you know how you have this sample problem, but like a default document that kind of states what the different values are for each of the measures?
Different values for each measure?
Yeah, because like you said, when you open up a new project, it has default values.
Yes. You want to know what the default values are?
I think right now no, but I think I will have to know in the future. I guess if I write this manual, just to identify like, hey, make sure to change this value or make sure to change this value, and so on and so forth. Well, I mean, I could figure it out.
Well, so the measure library in OptiMiser is based on the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, but it is it's always changing. So as we get feedback from contractors in different regions, we update the defaults. Like for example, in attic, this is set to R49 cellulose. It could very well, and a contractor might change it. These are all user editable. So someone might come in and say, I usually do R60, or they might remove the list entirely. So they have complete control over that. You can come into any measure and you can add to or edit the entire library. So I can, this is just the attic measures. I can remove, using this include column, everything from the list, and then I could create my own measures, and I can name them. I can have specific products that I sell, with different R values and different unit costs, so people can manage all their costing in here.
Okay.
Yeah, and then when you apply, you pick that measure, it knows how much attic space there is, and it uses the unit cost to calculate a cost for that item and a complete bid. So it's all user configurable. But you can come in here and easily see, just if you open a new project, just start OptiMiser, you can see what the current defaults are, what our standard factory defaults are for each measure.
Okay.
Yeah, so you notice when I left this page, then it loaded the weather data. So when I first started OptiMiser, it had some default location loaded. When I set, and it didn't change it when I first set the zip on the project tab, but when I left this screen, it set the new weather data for North Las Vegas, and it's pretty good about that. It won't let them, like if they try to go to the attic section first or something, it'll actually say, hey, you need to load weather data for you changed the zip code. So they don't really have to worry about that. And then we get into utility bill data entry, so they can walk through it screen by screen, or they can use this detailed interface. You can enter in bills one at a time, any period, doesn't have to be a month, or you can use a scrape tool. So this doesn't actually scrape anything, it just allows you to paste in bills. So I'm going to do that now from this text file. You can copy things in from a text file, from a web page, HTML, or PDF. It's pretty flexible. I'm just going to hit Control C, copy in my fuel, and then I'm going to copy in my electric. And then you just tell it which column is which. So in this case, I have my data formatted with date and usage. But if it was in a different format, you just tell, OptiMiser which column is which. I'm going to remove these extra columns that I'm not using. I don't have amounts in here. Again, if I had billed amounts for this period, so if this month this costs, $200, then I could actually put it in there, say this is the bill, and it would use a regression to back calculate the unit cost, the average unit cost for that fuel over that period, and it would use that. So it just loaded in those bills. That's all that does. It's pretty smart about cleaning the dates, formats and stuff, and putting them in order and things like that. You also hear this is just for the bill analysis, this fuel type, heat source. It does not affect the rest of the model. So when you get down to the heating section, you're specifying the heating system. It's not necessarily going to know what you've done here. This is just all has to do with analyzing these bills. So we're saying when we look at this bills and we look at how weather changed over that time period, you're going to look for a heating signal. This building was heated by fuel. And the other important thing here is whether or not it had a cooling system. That's helpful to say, yeah, it did have a cooling system. And then if there's no, if it's a natural gas home but there's no gas DHW or range or oven, then you can check no base load, and that helps with that heating analysis a little bit. None of these things are super critical.
Can you repeat that no base load option again? That's when.
Yeah. So if you hover over the control, it gives you a tooltip too on every control. But basically, it's saying that this fuel here, the gas, natural gas, is only going to be used in this house for heating. So yeah. So when we do the regression of these data points over this time period, then OptiMiser knows that it's going to go all the way down to 0. If there's no heating load, then there shouldn't be any gas usage. Otherwise, it might leave the bottom of that curve up above 0 somewhere because it thinks there's base load being used. And then this is like the best possible. The next stage here is just a little analysis results summary. This is the best possible result, of course, is my little test house. This is a real house, but you don't always get this, especially if you have someone on a delivered fuel, like if you have someone with a propane tank they use or something. I live in Maine, so we have a lot of oil users. We might put in an annual figure, and so you might not get a detailed calibration available for the fuel, but it doesn't really matter because OptiMiser is going to, as you go through and refine the model, OptiMiser may be able to calibrate to it anyways. But in this case, it happens to be a really good match, so it's available to calibrate the model, which is really helpful again. So then you go to a diagnostic screen if you want. You can look at this. It just gives you some possible indicators of what's going on in the house based on the bill analysis, just based on the bill analysis. Utility prices again. Okay, and then we get into the kind of the guts of the modeling, the building geometry, and so forth. Information's always cascading through. So when you hit a control, it automatically updates the rest. So if I said this was only 35 feet, it would update the width as well. It's automatically keeping track of net areas and surface areas and stuff. So the geometry entry is very simple. This is all you have to do. You would also, at this point, if you had a multi-story building, tell it how many floors there were. And then you get into the foundation area. So now this is what it thinks that the footprint is 1169. You could then divvy this up. So if you had, if you, in your conditioned area, if you included some area over a garage, you could put that area here, frame floor. So that's just area, that's frame floors that are over ambient space. So rooms over garages or overhangs. It's not to be used for floors over crawl spaces and basements. In this case, I think this is all slab, so I'm going to put all my area there under slab. And then there's a floor-by-floor layout. So again, this example is pretty simple. So the whole thing is going to be attic. You may have floors of different sizes. So you may have some, some attic area. If you had a cape that had knee walls and insulated attic space behind the knee walls, you may have a little bit of unconditioned attic space above the first floor, and then some more unconditioned attic space above the second floor. And this would it would add floors here, depending on what you set in dimensions. And you can just tell it which type of ceiling is above. And it's not, this is not, doesn't set anything in stone. It just kind of helps to make things easier down here when you get into the attic and ceiling part. It sets up the screens for you, depending on what kind of layout you choose here. And then you go through component by component. You're setting the base and the proposed improvement. The controls will change depending on whether or not you expose an improvement. This is what the guys at PSD call this the measure-driven modeling. So basically, it really doesn't matter that much actually what you set on the base side for the parts of the home that you're not actually specifying an improvement on in terms of the overall accuracy of the savings estimates. You need a coarse, so that the controls are rather coarse when you aren't specifying an improvement. Like in this case for windows, you specify a percent area by floor or wall area, and it'll actually let you calibrate that. So you may have some contractors that are measuring windows. If they're not measuring windows, then probably they will just leave this as is. And the calibrate means at the end of this workflow on the calibrate step, it's actually going to model iteratively thousands of models, and it's going to step between these two values. And it's going to do that with a lot of different controls here. So it's going to step through whatever range you set to find the model that best fits historical usage. So that's what this is. If you don't want it to calibrate it, you can just uncheck this. If I click specify improvement, then I get a more detailed set of controls. So now I can specify the exact window area at each position, because in order to get a good estimate of savings for adding an exterior treatment or for changing the window type, I need to know more specifically what was there and how many square feet of it on which face. But again, if I don't need to know that, then it's not really critical. So we allow that to be calibrated. Then you can switch window types. You can add additional window types if you're doing you have a couple different major window types. You can actually add a lot more if you want to, especially if you're doing some exterior treatment on all these different window types. Then it might help you to be able to add all these different types of existing windows and skylights and sliding doors and stuff like that as well. And then there's the opaque doors, walls. Walls, again, unless you get these kind of categorical responses here for the type of insulation in there. You can say poorly insulated or well insulated. Or if you actually know you drilled it or whatever, then you can specify. And you can say exactly how much is in there. Let's leave this as unknown for now. attics. So there's two different, so there's attics and ceilings. Attics is open cavity, ceilings are closed cavity, vaulted ceilings or flat roofs, all in the ceilings area. Attics is anything with an open cavity. So you have, here's one attic space and here's the improvement for it. So you specify the area and the roof color and then the insulation specifications. You can calibrate this. This by default is not, because most people check this and have a specific depth. If you observe significant variation over that attic area, you might want to calibrate it and say, yeah, it's somewhere between 3 and 5, and then OptiMiser again will calibrate through that range to find what specific value works best for the model to get you a really good baseline. And then I showed you already the insulation for the improved side. You can blow in insulation on top of existing, or you can replace. Each attic area can have a knee wall associated with it, so you can say there's 200 feet of knee wall, and then this can also be insulated. You can add additional attic area by clicking this there. Each of these screens also have detailed screens. I'll hop in here just to show you. Most people do not use these. If some people find that they think they need to, but we've over the years added a lot more functionality into the wizard simple screens. So typically now you don't really need to. Some people still do it just because it's their kind of routine. So if you catch people doing that, you might want to point them back to the wizard. The wizard actually gives you more consistent results, better baselines, because it gives you it's a lot more dynamic stuff going on in the wizard interface. But occasionally people want to use this. You can go in here. There's a parallel path calculator if you're interested in a total assembly R values and how OptiMizer is calculating all that stuff. You can go in here and check that out, and all the different layers. Occasionally someone who comes in to a house that is got a wall that is unfinished or it's been remodeled, and they want to say, okay, I'm gonna add the sheathing and the whatever internal inside wallboard and stuff to this, then they can make those settings here. They can change these components. Okay, and then ceilings, again, closed cavity or vaulted or flat roofs. You can define the area by the footprint or by the total area. So the difference is this is the top-down kind of blueprint view. So if I said there was, 600 square feet of that, and it was a 512 pitch, as soon as I enter that 600 feet, it calculates the actual area, surface area, or you can do it the other way as well. And then you just, again, talk. It's just like the attic. You specify the insulation, or you give it a categorical value. Frame floors, again, are floors. Typically, they're rooms over garages, but they can be for if you have overhangs and stuff too. Out here, in New England, we have a lot of that stuff going on. And then these are disabled, the crawl and basement, because I didn't have any area, so I would actually have to go back to foundations and specify that I had crawl space, so I wanted to enter it in there. So I skipped to slab. And then infiltration, it's set up to take a blower door number, and then your improvement, you pick a leakage reduction value, and then you can also put in a target specific CFM50 in there as well. The local, this is the min CFM50 is on the improved side. It's calculated with the ASHRAE 62.2/2013 standards. But if you want that to be accurate, you have to use the local ventilation, and it gives you a message there saying as much. So you put in the kitchen and bath windows and like so. And then it gives you a little warning. It says, oops, the ventilation rate is below the recommendations. Still below recommendations. So I'll say it's actually this. Oops, hold on. Okay. And then you can also specify mechanical ventilation if you want to. Oops. You can specify existing mechanical, or you can say, well, I want to add in heat recovery ventilation or whatever. Thermostats, because I have bills in there, it gives me a range. Again, this is the calibration range. If you don't want to calibrate, if you know exactly how they're setting their thermostat, you can set these to the same value, or you can use the detailed interface and get really more specific. You can set the type, you can set multiple setbacks and so forth. Okay, so here's the heating. You can add up to 3 heating systems, 3 cooling systems. They can have shared delivery systems or separate delivery systems. You start by specifying the fuel type, and then the type. On the base side, it gives you a generic age class 2, and all that does is it presets an efficiency estimate, but then you change that. Again, if you are not measuring the efficiency and you're using a boilerplate efficiency, you might calibrate that as well. If you are measuring it, then don't calibrate it, lock it in. But if you don't know, you can do that as an option. The capacity for that heating system is here. And then when you specify an improvement, just like all the others, you click the specify an improvement link. If you want to add supplemental heat, then what you want to do is you're going to say there's no improvement for this system. The systems are sort of lined up left to right. So here's the first system, and I'm going to say there's no improvement to that one. I'm going to add a second one. And on the base side, it says there's 0 load. So there's actually no existing second heating system. But on the improved side, I'm going to say this is going to take 80% of the load now, and it's going to be an electric mini split room heat pump. And then so now I'm going from a gas furnace only to the same gas furnace plus a heat pump that's taking up most of the heating load. And you can set the cooling properties right there. And then when I go to cooling, it has that heat pump here in the second system on the improved side. Now my default for the first one was a central AC, so I might say, yeah, I think this is a reasonable situation. So they had a central air system, but I'm not going to improve that one. But I am going to add this heat pump, and that's going to take actually 100% of the cooling load. So it's 80% of the heating load, 100% of the cooling load, and it gives me this message that says I just deactivated system 1. And that's because, and that's what I wanted to do. That's because it has to equal 100% of the load. So when I said this heat pump is now going to, I'm going to model it as having 100% of the load, that it just deactivated the first system. That's fine. Okay, so we just added a supplemental heat pump as a recommendation. Delivery systems. So this starts with a location. This is really important. If any part of that delivery system, a significant portion of it is in unconditioned space, you want to make sure that you use one of these attic condition, attic crawl, attic basement, something like that, because otherwise, there's not going to be any savings associated with, if it's all in conditioned space, there's not going to be any savings associated with that improvement. So if there's a significant part of it, then you want to go 50-50. Let's say it's attic condition or something. And then there's 2 ways people can enter in. There's a visual method. They can say it's very leaky, or they can say they can actually put in a CFM25 value. And then you can also add if there's insulation. If you're using a measured leakage, you say there's a 50% reduction, or you can just type the number in. Either way, it gives you the field to put in the actual CFM25 target number. And then you can add insulation if you want. By the way, I haven't mentioned, on each page they can add images and notes, and they can also save all their note contents. They can have as many saved note contents for this field as they want. And anytime they start a project, they can start to build up sort of a library of notes for each of these components. They can snap. I don't have my my camera hooked up here, but if you're on a tablet that has an onboard camera, then it'll actually just load up your camera, and they can snap them right there, or you can pick from any place on your computer. Design loads. So these are there for people to use. There's a page in the report too. It talks about the design loads for the existing conditions and under the improved scenario. So you can talk about under oversizing. And then here's the lighting and appliances simple view. So there's you can get really detailed with plug loads and OptiMiser if you want. You can actually get into specifying the consumption and number of appliances for just about everything in the house. But most people don't. Most people are using the simple view. You can specify lighting either by percentages or by bulb counts. So if you wanted to do a lighting improvement and you said there were like 10 of those, and no LEDs, and you wanted to go to LEDs, you could say you were going to actually put in 10 LEDs, replace the existing incandescents, and leave the CFLs. So again, I just typed in this one field, and it tries to be intelligent about keeping things in sync. Dishwasher, clothes washer, basically you're just saying whether or not you have Energy Star. You can model improvements to those. We do have the Energy Star database built in here for appliances. We don't do that for other things like heating systems. We don't have a database of all the heating systems. You can specify any kind of efficiency you want, and you can record the model number, but it doesn't have a lookup where you can say this is a Bosch 25,000 or a Mitsubishi heat pump or something. But this, we actually do have a library of Energy Star appliances. And then this is actually somewhat important. This is the dryer fuel and the range fuel. So if you don't have natural gas, people just want to check this to make sure, because it'll throw the modeling off. If this says there's gas dryer and a gas range, then the model is going to have a little bit of gas usage in it. So if they don't actually have those gas appliances, then you want to definitely change those. I think in this case our bills do. I think this house that we're using actually does have those though. And then there's pool pump. So you can specify this. The tooltip tells you what this does. This is just a very quick way to add an existing single stage pool pump, and then you can add a variable speed, just a default variable speed model there. Again, if I go to detailed and I go to pool pump, then I can get really advanced here and specify all kinds of metrics about the pool pump. But I'm going to leave this as simple. Separate pages for refrigerators and freezers. And then here's my hot water. Okay. This is the gas tank. Again, you start by specifying the fuel and then the type. You can add multiple domestic hot water systems if you want, up to 3. You can specify an improvement here. Again, we support boiler, tankless coils, side arms, heat pump water heaters, all that stuff. Then there's tank pipe wrap. You can do it as existing, or you can specify improvements. We support renewables. There's a full PV, so you can put in an existing array. So this, very quickly, if you came across a house that already had an array, you could put in a quick 4.5 kilowatt, array. You could specify a quick improvement if you want. So let's say they have nothing and you want to add 5 kilowatts. Or you can go again to the detailed inputs, and you can get more sophisticated into the array layout, and then it will actually get into the production analysis. It does a daily analysis. It'll give you the monthly sums here for the solar fraction and that kind of stuff. So, and then there's also solar thermal as well. I'm not sure what those messages are. And then there's calibrate, and the calibrate step just has a couple little things here. It wants to calibrate everything because and it has sensible ranges. So it's not going to, like, say the model didn't line up with bills, it's not going to eliminate appliance usage or hot water or something in order to make them line up. There are a set of standards included in the BFI 2400 specification that govern the ranges for calibration, and so we also have modified and actually narrowed them in some cases based on people's expectations, so that they're always within reasonable limits. However, some people, you might not want to calibrate hot water usage at all. So you have a gas water heater, the gas bills are way higher than the model would suggest. Should we increase hot water usage in the model to make that line up? By default, yes, we will, within limits. But if you don't want that to change, this behavioral stuff, then you can uncheck that. So you can uncheck the hot water usage calibration. You can uncheck the other appliance and plug load calibration. And then OptiMiser won't use those to try to make the model line up with bills. Otherwise, it's all up for grabs. So this calibration, it only takes a couple seconds here, is not changing any values that were set directly by the user. It's just changing things that weren't set, or it's calibrating through the ranges that were indicated by the user. And then this is what you end up with. You should end up with a perfect calibration. So this is it's not quite perfect. You can see these are the bills that were entered on this column here, exactly summed as they were entered. And then here is the weather normalized bills. And then here's the model baseline. So we want the model baseline to be as close to this as possible. And they are very, very, very close. So they're off a little bit in each case in fuel and electric usage, but this is a very tight calibration. And you could continue. You might go back. You might say, well, the physics model is predicting more fuel usage. Why is that? Maybe the heating system's more efficient than we indicated, and you could go back and increase the efficiency or increase some insulation levels so it's not using so much. It's not, whatever you wanted to do, you could try to make that line up, but I would not. This is it's well within our BPI 2400 limits, so to us that's a great calibration. And then you end up on this package screen, which indicates, it shows you all the things that you've selected as you've gone through, and it shows you the SIRs. You can go to the next step and you could select additional things. Maybe you wanted to include that wall measure. I wanted to include the ceiling measure. Looks like my air sealing, I must have had a really low blow dryer number in there. And then, so these things, like I didn't put a cost in for my generic mini split, so that's got a really great payback. Yeah, and the pool pump. Let's not do the water heater. Okay, and then the next step is refining the reports. So you can go in, actually I should mention health and safety. So here are generic health and safety items. Then there's the CAS section that you can work through here and do the CAS results for each system. And then here are general health and safety issues. Okay, and then there's photo notes. So anything, these includes the images that I had added as you work through. Like here's I was on the duck screen, I guess, when I added that image. So you could come here and change that or add a note. And those all go into the report. There's owner concerns. So there's a section of the report that some people use that's focused on owner concerns. So you can come in here and change that. And then the improvements tab these sub-tabs are different ways of looking at the improvements and modifying, adding to them, adjusting costs, and so forth. In here you can see, if I go on the cost tab is about looking at the improvement costs, incentives, and financing. So for Energy Upgrade California, we've got the rebate calculations are in there, doing their thing automatically. People can add, if for some reason they're operating in a program where they have some other incentive, outside incentive that also applies, they can add that. You can keep expanding this and add multiple incentives. And then you can add financing here too. So you can finance things row by row. So if you're just financing the PV system, for example, you could just put financing on that row. Where is that? That's at the top, I think. Yeah, so you could just you could finance that, or you could finance the whole thing. The loan parameters are down at the bottom here, so you can change the rate and the term. Right, and then the only thing here I would show you is on custom. Again, this is all about the measure. So in here, you can, anything that's green in OptiMiser, you can edit. So you can actually type right in here, and you can change the descriptions of these item categories. You can come in here and you can just add as many items as you want. So you could add, remodel the kitchen and, put in a new hot tub or whatever. And you can't add savings, energy savings, but you can add cost, and that will drive down the SIR. It's included in the package cost. The other way to do that is on the bid form, you can actually add line items in here to any. So this is the attic section, right? This is my installation item that I added previously when I was going through the wizard. But you could add materials down here, anything, and you can continue to refine that bid. A lot of people don't use the system. We have a few people that are, really working it, but so that's kind of it interacts with the model in the sense that you can add cost to this, which drives the SIR down. And then this is just a different way of looking at that proposal. So it's everything that I've selected. It tells me how much of it, the cost, my incentive, my net cost, and I can include savings in this view too if I want to. And then down at the bottom, it's got a little summary, and then it's got terms and conditions that are editable. The contractor can save that, and they can actually have the homeowner sign right there on the tablet. So when I'm ready to go, I go to the HPXML, and I see that I've got a few issues that I've got to resolve. First of all, up at the top here, I've got my audit step. Is this an audit or a retrofit file? And then, I have my various rebate schemes that I can select from up here, and I can actually turn them off entirely if I want to. So, but I'm going to fix these. Basically, you have to, in HPXML, you have to have a utility supplier if you have bills. And then when I clear those, my Get HPXML button automatically appears. Then I just click that. And it generates a file. So this file is saved separately. As you know, it's just a standalone XML document that they can then upload to whatever system they need to. So that just saved where I needed it to save. This is all offline, by the way. OptiMiser is an offline Windows app. So people operate it in two ways. It's either a standalone app like you'd run Excel or Word or something offline, and they manage the files themselves, and if they want to send them somewhere, they email it or whatever, use Dropbox. Or it can be a connected app. It can connect to our web services. So we have our own back-end project management system that's licensed separately from OptiMiser, and people who use that use a system called the ePortal that to send and receive projects. So that's just it's a totally different way. You may run into some people who are doing that. It doesn't really affect you. They're still, you'll still have their XML document, whatever. But it's just a way of, it's sort of like our own file sharing, cloud service or something, so they can collaborate on projects and things like that. But by and large, it's it's really, you can think of it as an offline app, and so it's not we don't have access to people's data unless they share something with us to debug a file or something. So people need to be saving their projects as they go along, and that kind of thing. So we got the HPXML. The only other thing is the reporting. So there's lots of user configuration in terms of the homeowner reports. I showed you the proposal. The report is more graphical. So there's all kinds of sections. There's cover pages. Like I said, there's owner concerns. I'll show you how that looks. This preview shows them where they can drop photos from their computer or snap them with their onboard camera. So these boxes don't print out, but they're there in the preview to show them where they can add photos. These are all editable on the fly here. They can add just the wording. There's general information, existing home characteristics, and then so these checkboxes govern what's printed. So they can save as many of these selections as they want. They can create really short reports, long reports. It goes in and talks about the improvements. Some people like to include line item costs, some people don't. Some people like to include the incentives on here, some people don't. So it's up to them. There's all kinds of configurations. You can show multiple packages or just this one recommended package. It goes through each area of the home, and it describes the existing condition and the proposed improvements, and then they can add photos. A lot of times people add a photo that's like a target condition to one side, and they'll save that as a default photo, so every report shows the same, attic, this is the, ideal condition, and then they'll use the other photo slot as a sort of a existing, here's, the before and after kind of thing. So it goes through all the area of the house. Let's see, design loads, PV, these are all set up very similarly. Then there's some bonus stuff. It talks about other items that you haven't. So here's your current house energy costs under the recommended improvement scenario, and then what if you added the water heaters? What if you added the windows? What if you added the refrigerator? That kind of thing. Talks about the modeling itself and why, where do these estimates come from, and why did we go through all the trouble of putting it in software and that kind of thing. You can include that bid form right in the PDF report if you want. So this is a lot. CAS information, which we didn't have any test results, other health and safety information. Then you can include a glossary if you want and a bunch of other photos. You can also attach any kind of PDF you want, and then you generate that as a PDF. Phew. All right, so that's my full end-to-end overview. What questions can I answer for you? Diego.
Yeah, I'm right here.
Hey, any questions I can answer for you?
I had one right here. Oh, let me get to the wizard. Where was it where if if they don't want to, if they have like a package unit in the home, where would you go to enter like that information?
If they had,
Separately.
what do you? I'm not familiar. If they had a heat pump in the home.
No, a package unit. So they don't have a split. They don't have a split system. They have like a package unit.
So that's not the same as central air.
It is. It's just that the condenser and the furnace are in one, like inside one unit. Like, you know, when you go to a store
I see,
and they
like
have
a
those
commercial unit. Yeah.
Yeah.
We don't have those in this model. So you could, yeah, you could specify them separately.
Okay.
Yeah, the AC and the furnace separately.
Yeah, I would have to. Yeah, I don't have no questions. I just need to start practicing and building some models, and then my questions will come up.
Okay. Yeah, we do have, just so you know, we have a separate commercial tool that people use for small business and all the way up to large commercial and industrial facilities. So and for multifamily. So this tool is specifically for single family all the way up to units within single units within apartment buildings. And then the commercial tool is used for everything else. But please, yeah, reach out. You can communicate directly with me if you have questions. You can also use, if you're working on a specific job, the best way to get help if your question starts with anything like, you know, why am I seeing this, or these savings don't match my expectations, or something like that, then what you want to do is hit this error report button, and it scoops up a screenshot and all the necessary logs, and it sends, it sends it right to our development team in our issue tracking software, so that we can prioritize that. So that's the best way to get help on us when you're doing a specific job in OptiMiser. General how-to questions on the OptiMiser Energy site.
On the forum?
We have, we have a forum and a video library. So those are great places to go for general how-tos. And if you search from anywhere, you'll get results from the forum and from the videos and stuff as well. So those are pretty good. And we monitor this and give feedback to that as well.